I discovered my girlfriend was married to my dad. I never thought my life would come crashing down because of a secret so twisted it felt like something out of a bad movie. 2 years ago, everything seemed simple. I had a decent job, a group of friends, and Sarah, the girl I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. She was different from anyone I'd ever met, mysterious, smart, and just the right amount of complicated. We hit off fast, and soon she was a part of my everyday life. Sarah was careful with her past. She rarely spoke about her family or old relationships, and I never pushed. It didn't feel right. I liked the version of Sarah I knew, and I want to believe that was all there was. My father, Mark, was a successful businessman, a man of respect, but not of warmth. Our relationship was distant. After my parents divorced, he and I became strangers living under the same roof. I didn't tell Sarah much about him, and she didn't ask. One night, Sarah insisted on meeting my dad. The evening was awkward, but what unsettled me was the way my father looked at her, like she was someone familiar, someone he had known for a long time. There was a smile on her face, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Weeks later, while helping my dad clear out the attic, I found an old photo album. Inside was a faded wedding picture, my dad standing next to Sarah. The shock left me speechless. The woman I loved was once married to my father. The discovery tore everything apart. I started digging, looking for answers. What I found was a web of secrets, lies, and half-truths. Emails between Sarah and my dad revealed a relationship that hadn't ended as cleanly as they claimed. Phone logs showed constant contact. I confronted Sarah, but her answers only raised more questions. She said the marriage was annulled long before I met her, that it was complicated, that they both wanted to forget it. My dad admitted to the marriage, but begged me to understand that he did it to protect me, to shield me from pain. Trust shattered. I withdrew, lost in a fog of betrayal. Months later, I found a letter from my dad. It spoke of promises and a secret about my birth, a secret that would change everything I thought I knew about myself. This was no longer just about Sarah and my dad. This was about me, my origins, and a family secret so deep it threatened to consume us all. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and restless thoughts. I went through old messages, pictures, and memories, trying to piece together the timeline of their secret past. Each new discovery cut deeper. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how little I had known. Sarah's story unfolded slowly. She had fallen in love with my dad when she was young, ambitious, and struggling to find her place in the world. Their marriage was a desperate attempt to hold on to something real in a life full of chaos. But my dad was already married to my mom, and their affair was doomed from the start. The secret marriage was hidden away, erased from public records and family memories. I questioned everything. The man I called dad, the woman I loved, the family I thought I knew. It was all built on lies. I couldn't escape the feeling that my life was no longer my own. Every memory, every moment was under siege by this impossible truth. The woman I loved, my girlfriend Sarah, had been married to my father, a man I barely knew but had always respected, now felt like a stranger hiding behind a mask of lies. The more I searched, the more tangled the story became. Old photos surfaced showing moments of happiness between Sarah and my dad, moments I had never imagined existed. Their smiles were genuine, but their eyes told a different story, one of pain, regret, and unspoken fears. Their marriage had been kept secret, not just from me, but from the world. A quiet ceremony, an attempt at a new start that fate refused to allow. The reasons for their separation were murky: disagreements, family pressure, and perhaps guilt that haunted them both. I wrestled with the idea that my own existence might be a byproduct of this hidden union. The letter from my dad hinted at secrets about my birth that he had kept buried for decades. Promises made, sacrifices endured, all in the name of protecting me. But the protection came at a cost. My trust was broken, my world shattered. I began to pull away from Sarah, unsure if our relationship could survive this revelation. The love I once felt was clouded by suspicion, doubt, and heartbreak. She tried to explain, but words fell hollow. In the silence that followed, I found myself alone with questions that had no answers. Days turned into weeks, and the emotional weight pressed down on me relentlessly. I stopped talking to friends and avoided family gatherings. My mind was a storm of what-ifs and maybes. I reached out to Sarah one last time, desperate for clarity. Her confession came slowly, each detail a knife twisting in my chest. She spoke of a love that was real but flawed, of mistakes made in youth, of promises broken. But it wasn't enough. I needed to understand why they had kept this from me for so long. Why had my dad hidden his marriage to Sarah? Why had Sarah walked away without a word? The answers seemed to lie buried in the past, locked away in memories neither wanted to revisit. I knew I had to confront my father again, to peel back the layers of his silence. Confronting him was harder than I imagined. His eyes held a mixture of guilt and sorrow. He spoke of a life complicated by choices he wasn't proud of a desire to protect me from pain he couldn't bear to explain. He told me about the early days of his marriage to Sarah, the secret meetings, the stolen moments, the impossible hope for a future that never came. Their split was messy, painful, and filled with regrets. But he swore that his love for me was genuine, and that his mistakes were not meant to hurt me. Hearing him, I felt a flicker of compassion, but also a deeper confusion. How could love and betrayal coexist in the same story? Days blurred into nights as I wrestled with the overwhelming mixture of emotions inside me. The revelation had changed everything. My past, my present, and what I thought my future with Sarah might be. The man who had raised me and the woman I loved were now entangled in a web of secrets I couldn't untangle. I found myself haunted by memories that once seemed insignificant, but now carried a heavier meaning. Little moments between Sarah and my father that I had brushed off as coincidence suddenly felt deliberate, charged with hidden emotions. I realized that the threads of their secret marriage wove through my life in ways I hadn't understood. I questioned my own identity. Was I a product of love or deceit? Was my existence the result of a union built on betrayal? The thought made me recoil, but I couldn't ignore it. My isolation deepened. I withdrew from friends, from Sarah, from anyone who might force me to confront the chaos in my heart. The silence was suffocating, but it was the only place I felt safe. I needed time to think, to process the storm raging inside. Sarah reached out, her messages full of regret and a desperate desire for forgiveness. But the wounds were too fresh, the betrayal too deep. Trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild, and mine was shattered beyond recognition. I turned back to the letter my dad had left me, his words a mixture of confession and apology. He wrote of sacrifices made, of promises to keep me safe, and of secrets too painful to share until now. The letter was a map of his guilt, but it offered little solace. Despite the pain, I knew I had to face the truth head-on. Avoiding my father or Sarah wouldn't heal the wounds. I needed to understand the full story, not just the parts they wanted me to see. I began gathering more pieces of the puzzle: old emails, photographs, forgotten letters. Each discovery revealed more complexity, more shades of gray in a story I wanted to see in black and white. Their secret marriage was not just a moment of weakness, but a tangled chapter of their lives filled with hope, despair, and impossible choices. One night, in the quiet of my apartment, I realized that this story was no longer just about my dad or Sarah. It was about me, my place in a family shaped by secrets and lies. I was caught in the crossfire of their past, struggling to find my own path forward. The love I once felt for Sarah was complicated by the truth, but beneath the pain, a flicker of understanding remained. People make mistakes. People hide things out of fear or love. And sometimes, the only way forward is through forgiveness. As weeks turned into months, the weight of the secret marriage settled heavily on my shoulders. I realized that no matter how much I tried to push it aside, it was a part of my story now. My dad's past with Sarah had shaped not only their lives, but mine in ways I had never imagined. I found myself retracing my own memories, searching for signs I had missed. The time Sarah looked away when I mentioned my dad, the silence after awkward family dinners, the unspoken tension in the room. All the small details suddenly fit into a larger, painful puzzle. My relationship with Sarah became strained. Love alone couldn't bridge the chasm that had opened between us. The trust that once grounded us was fractured. She was part of my past and my present, but the shadow of their secret haunted every moment. I grappled with feelings of anger, betrayal, and sorrow. I wondered if I could ever truly forgive them, my father for hiding the truth, and Sarah for being a part of it. Yet, amid the turmoil, I held on to the hope that understanding might bring healing. That love, complicated and flawed, could find a way. I reached out to a counselor, desperate for guidance. Talking through the chaos helped me unravel my emotions and face the pain without being consumed by it. I realized that secrets like these don't just affect the ones who keep them. They ripple through everyone connected. The path forward was uncertain, filled with difficult choices and emotional reckonings. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't live in the shadow of this secret any longer. With a tentative heart, I started rebuilding bridges. With Sarah, with my father, and most importantly, with myself. The road was rocky, filled with setbacks and doubts. But step by step, I learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means accepting the past and moving forward. In time, I found peace not in answers, but in resilience. The secret that once threatened to destroy me became a part of my story, a painful chapter that taught me about love, betrayal, and the complicated bonds of family. Days became weeks, and the burden of hidden truths began to loosen its grip. I discovered strength I didn't know I had. The story of my dad and Sarah was no longer just a source of pain, but a lesson in resilience and complexity. I came to understand that people are flawed, and love is often messy and imperfect. My father and Sarah were no exceptions. They made mistakes, hid things, but beneath it all were human beings trying to navigate difficult choices. I started focusing on what lay ahead. Forgiveness wasn't about excusing the past, but freeing myself from its chains. It was about rebuilding trust, setting new boundaries, and choosing honesty moving forward. Sarah and I talked more openly, cautiously rebuilding a relationship shaped by truth. My father and I found new ways to communicate, grounded in a fragile but growing understanding. Life didn't return to normal overnight. The shadows of the past lingered, but I was no longer afraid of them. I faced each day with a clearer mind and a steadier heart. I realized that discovering Sarah's marriage to my dad was a breaking point, but also a beginning, a painful awakening to the realities hidden beneath the surface of family and love. In the end, my story became one of acceptance and growth. I couldn't change what happened, but I could choose how to move forward. The secrets that once threatened to tear me apart became a part of my journey, a testament to the complicated, sometimes painful nature of love and family. The longer I dwelled on the truth, the more I realized that secrets like this don't just fade away. They linger, shaping the contours of our lives in unseen ways. I found myself constantly reflecting on what had been hidden, the choices made in silence, the sacrifices kept in shadows. Every relationship I had was now viewed through a new lens. Trust became fragile, but also more precious. I learned to value honesty in a way I never had before, understanding that the lies were often born from fear rather than malice. Sarah and I struggled to redefine what our relationship could be. The past was a heavy weight, but it also forced us to confront realities we had avoided. We began talking more openly about everything. Our fears, our regrets, our hopes. It wasn't easy. Sometimes, the silence between us was louder than any words. But slowly, a new connection took shape, one built on raw honesty and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths. My father and I weren't the same men we had been before the secret came to light. The years of distance and mistrust gave way to cautious understanding. He shared more about his regrets, his reasons, and the pain he had carried alone. I didn't forgive him all at once, but I began to see him as more than just the man who had a secret marriage. I saw the flawed human beneath, a man who loved in his own broken way. As I pieced together my family's history, I came to accept that life rarely offers neat endings. The story of Sarah, my dad, and me was messy, painful, and filled with uncertainty. But it was real, and in that reality, I found a strange kind of peace. Moving forward, I focused on building a life grounded in truth, no matter how difficult or uncomfortable that truth might be. I learned to embrace the complexity of love and family, knowing that the past would always be a part of me, but not the whole of me. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was ready to walk it, with open eyes and an open heart. The truth had a strange way of reshaping my understanding of love and family. I realized that even the deepest wounds could lead to growth if I allowed myself to face them. The secrets that once haunted me gradually became lessons, painful but necessary. In quiet moments, I reflected on how much had changed. The man I thought I knew, the woman I loved, and the boy I once was, all intertwined in a complicated story I was still learning to accept. Sarah and I found moments of peace amid the chaos. We started building new memories, cautious but hopeful. Trust was fragile but growing. We learned to communicate without fear, to share our vulnerabilities without judgment. It wasn't a perfect relationship, it never would be. But it was real, grounded in the messy truth we both carried. My father's presence in my life shifted as well. We weren't close, but the walls between us came down a little. Conversations became more honest, tinged with remorse, but also with a desire to make amends. I knew forgiveness wouldn't come easily, but I also understood that holding on to anger would only trap me in the past. In time, I stopped seeing the secret marriage as a curse and started seeing it as a catalyst. It forced me to grow, to question, and to redefine my relationships. It challenged my assumptions and pushed me toward a deeper understanding of who I was. That realization became a turning point, a moment where pain began to transform into something stronger. I couldn't change the past, but I could choose how to live with it. The story of Sarah, my father, and me was complicated and imperfect, but it was mine, and owning it gave me a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. There were days when the weight of the secret felt unbearable, nights filled with restless thoughts, memories I couldn't escape. But I refused to let it define me. Instead, I focused on the present, the choices I could make, the people I wanted to be around. My relationship with Sarah was far from perfect, but it was real. We had survived the impossible and were learning to build something new. That alone gave me hope. I began to write, not to share, but to understand. Pouring my thoughts on a paper became a way to untangle the knots inside my mind. The act of writing helped me see my story from a distance, to find meaning in the chaos. Through those pages, I confronted my anger, my grief, and my doubts. I found a voice I didn't know I had. My father's shadow no longer loomed as large. While our relationship remained complex, I saw him less as a source of betrayal and more as a flawed human. A man who had made terrible mistakes, but who also carried regrets heavier than I imagined. Understanding him didn't erase the past, but it allowed me to release some of the pain. Slowly, I began to rebuild my life, piece by piece. I focused on friendships, my work, and the small joys that had once seemed insignificant. The secret marriage that had once threatened to consume me became a chapter, not the whole story. Life was messy, but it was mine. Years had passed since the day I stumbled upon that faded wedding photo, the day my world unraveled and reassembled itself into something unrecognizable. The secret that once haunted me had transformed, no longer a curse, but a catalyst for change, for understanding, for growth. I had learned that the people we love are flawed, shaped by their own battles and regrets. My father and Sarah were no exceptions. Their choices, their mistakes, were part of a complicated dance of love, fear, and survival. But beneath the layers of betrayal and secrecy, There was something painfully human, a yearning for connection, a hope for redemption. Forgiveness came slowly. It wasn't about forgetting or excusing what happened, but about freeing myself from the chains of bitterness and pain. I chose to forgive my father, not because he deserved it, but because I needed peace. I chose to forgive Sarah, not because her past was without fault, but because holding on to anger only kept me prisoner. Our relationships changed, transformed by honesty and acceptance. Sarah and I rebuilt what had been broken, not pretending the past never existed, but facing it together, stronger for having endured it. My bond with my father remained complicated, but the walls between us had softened, replaced by cautious understanding. More than anything, I discovered the resilience within myself, the strength to face uncomfortable truths, to embrace imperfections, and to carve out a path forward. The secret marriage that had once seemed like the end of my story became a beginning, a testament to the messy, beautiful complexity of family and love. Life didn't offer neat endings or fairy tale resolutions. It offered something more real, the chance to heal, to grow, and to choose who I wanted to be. And in that choice, I found my redemption.